DailyFlip. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be jumping through a story talking about economic populism reigning across the entire United States. It's an interesting one coming from Jacobin. Definitely is not normally my taste, but you always got to be out on the lookout for what's going on, and you can't deny that the right and the left are both yearning for something that looks more like interventionist capitalism than the traditional free market that we saw coming out of the 90s. This article, like I said, comes from Jacobin. We're going to go through it. I'm going to give you time to actually answer a question. But with that said, let's also jump into that daily debate. So, if you're looking at a economy and you ask the question, who should it serve? What is your answer? Throw it down in the comment section. I want to hear, because I'm sure there's lots of different opinions. I'm sure you know mine if you've been a long-time listener. If you're a first-time listener, you'll definitely understand mine by the end, but I want to hear yours. Throw it down there. So with that said, let's actually jump into the article. Like I said, Jacobin, and the headline reads, "From New York to Ohio, Americans support economic populism." And the case study here that the author uses is in their home state of Ohio, but they also compare it to the messaging and the current campaign by Zoran Mondani in New York. Now, it's not unfair to say that he is a populist. It's not unfair to say that he is a progressive. And I don't think it's unfair to label many people in the Donald Trump administration populist on the economic front. Donald Trump himself is a populist. There's no doubt about it. He raised a populist movement. But on the economic front, you could make an argument that maybe he's not so much, though. I think that's the illusion that people like to give. And even if he himself is not, the people around him, like I mentioned before, very much are. J.D. Vance is a great example. And as the vice president this time, you cannot pretend as though the new right, the populist right, the one that is willing to wield the government as a tool for their political ends, it has not gained a foothold in the White House. And the question then becomes, why? So I want to actually jump into some of these different quotes that the author puts out here that describe what people want, what they see as necessary. And these are working class people. That is the coalition that the right has focused on, that the populist arguments, at least in the polls, seem to suggest. And now the author's trying to put some words in, some actual quotes from different people in this area, the Ohio area that voted for Obama in 2008 and 2012. And then flipped for Trump. So, first one I wanted to bring up is from Marissa. Quote, "A 33-year-old woman and pet care worker with an electrician husband expressed deep frustration to me, not only with housing costs, but also with the seeming disregard for from those in power. She wished that politicians, quote, saw us as people who are literally just trying to make it through life. We're still renting," she lamented. "We're desperately trying to buy a house. We can't even with a really nice down payment," end quote. So here's the frustration. The author goes through multiple stages here, and I'm not saying these are the stages of grief, but they are maybe the stages of discontentment. And what I mean by that is stage one looks something like not understanding. It's a little bit of anger. It's a little bit of denial about the nature of our politics. But in the most general sense, it is anger at the people who are supposed to be serving you. You are directing your anger. You're focusing back at them. Now, let's move on to the second stage here. This one comes from another working class woman. And this is... let's just read the quote. Quote, "People have to be taken care of. Socialism is part of this country, whether you like it or not. It's a part of what we are. That's why they call it Social Security. And my bad, it's not a working class woman, it's a working class man." And he didn't stop there. Quote, "I think people should have health care. People are entitled to it. I mean, I worked for what I have, but still, everyone should have it." Here's the ask. So beyond the anger, it no longer is just, I'm angry at you for making the system fail. I'm angry at you for making it harder on us. I'm angry at you for not solving the issues. But here is the ask, the moment where you translate that anger into what you want of your politicians, what you deserve, what you're entitled to. And I know these words have a whole bunch of weight on both sides of the aisle, but I want you to take them at plain value. That's all, okay? Take them here as the second stage of this political populist movement. So you've talked about the anger. You feel like the system isn't working for you. Now here's your ask, what you deserve, what you're entitled to. And then there's the final stage. Quote, this is from a gentleman named Keith, a 42-year-old image technician at a t-shirt company. Quote, I am very, very strongly in favor of it. So he's talking about the idea of socialism here. Quote, it's a means to an end in making sure that every human in this country has the basic needs that are met, and there's not going to be a question of that, end quote. So we've gone from the anger to the bargaining to the ask to the end-all be-all of socialism being the point to get there. And okay, you're maybe saying to yourself, whoa, Alex, well, you're conflating multiple things here. You're saying that the only way that these things end, the anger and discontentment, ends in socialism. And of course, I'm not necessarily making that argument because this is how the author lays it out, but I do think there's something to it, most definitely, and I wouldn't have brought up this process if I didn't think there's a point, which is, even if it's not socialist, it is the government being the one to solve the problem. This is the populist undergirding on either side of the aisle. You have the anger and discontent at the system, you have the bargain and ask, and then you have the government as the one to provide it. And of course, it is oriented towards government because you're mad at the politicians. But this is how populist fervor comes about. This is how the people get outraged and are willing to do whatever it takes to get people on the ticket or into office that say they're going to give them things. And this is how you create a populist incentive for people to come in and therefore promise that these sort of things are going to be given them when it's not realistic, when it is not actually going to be possible to give them everything they want. Great example in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or the One Big Beautiful Bill, now that it's going through. What is Donald Trump promising here? He's promising prosperity. On the trail, he said he's not going to cut Medicaid. Now, if you're a Democrat, you're saying this is a direct cut to Medicaid. And if you're a Republican, you're saying, actually, we're not cutting Medicaid. We're just making sure that people are able to demonstrate that they are working for the Medicaid. We're not actually stripping it of its funding. We are just saying there are going to be less people that are going to be able to afford is not the right word, qualify for this means-tested welfare. So no matter what side of the argument you fall on that, the end repercussion is going to be that less people have Medicaid. Now, is that a bad thing? You can have lots of different opinions on there. But the point I'm trying to make is that you can't have it both ways. You can't have a massive tax reduction across the entire people and say that, the tax reduction is actually, or in this case, codifying of the tax reduction, and we're going to bring in more revenue from that, but we're also going to have to cut Medicaid in order to make sure that we do not have a system that collapses. All these things. It's hard. It's hard to balance these two opposing things in this bill specifically, but more generally, it is almost impossible to actually deliver on all of these things. And if you're going to, you're doing it at the risk of something, especially when it comes to social welfare programs. Taxes are going to have to go up, which means people have less money in their pocket, which means, guess what? It's harder to buy that house. It's harder to get that down payment. You say to me, well, Alex, what if we give these people credits in order to actually subsidize their housing? One, then housing owners know that they can raise the price because they know a certain amount of it is subsidized, and guess where that money's coming from? Actually, the taxpayers. You say, well, hey, we do it in a different percentage rate. We actually take it from the top. I would make a whole capitalist argument to you about how that's actually going to strip people of their wealth. It's going to have downward economic effects, blah, 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 blah. The point that overall here in this section is that the way to make sure that this is not a system that disadvantageously benefits one versus the other is to make sure that the government is not in it. You will say, well, hey, money equals power in that situation. But once again, in a system that has no government intervention, that has no excess regulation, that has no hyper restrictions on who can and can't enter the market, normally done through regulation, you open up the door to more possibilities. Now, that means more people are going to have to buckle down. More people are going to have to be willing to be either a part of a system, or they're going to have to be willing to step up and make their own. But overall, there's no denying here. There's no denying here, even if you disagree with my thesis there in the last section of it, there's no denying that these populist movements are geared towards increasing the size of government because people who are disaffected and feel as though the government is not working for them are more willing and likely to vote for people that promise them things, promise that the government can fix their problems, promise that the government can at least aid in fixing their problems. And I'm not saying it's directly socialist. I am saying it leads to increased government. So it's a fascinating point that this author was making here about how there's more quote-unquote people that are favorable to socialism, or people who see it in a good light. And of course, as Jacobin, I'm sure there are plenty of people who didn't make it into this interview who didn't actually get their quotes said, but I don't think that it actually matters if you call it socialism, big government, whatever it may be, because at the end of the day, the results are the same. It is more direct intervention in the market. And this is what we're breeding. This is what we are breeding in the United States right now. People who are so discontent, who feel as though the system doesn't work for them, that they're bargaining away their ability to do things normally. And they're willing to do it following these populist, charismatic leaders, whether it be Mondani, whether it be Trump, whether it be Obama back in 2008 and 2012. Point being, it's interesting. If you want to go read this entire article for yourself, it'll be linked in the description below. That like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine, as well as the Twitter handle at Your Daily Flip, where I post the links to these episodes that come out on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, as well as the 6 and 6 episodes that come out on Tuesday and Thursday. It's 6 stories from around the world in 6 minutes or less, meant to be a brief overview of what's happening on the international stage. So, with that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe. Don't die.